Hello, I'm BrigantiaBlackbird. Happy Tuesday. Let's talk about Ellsworth Toohey. He is a character in Ayn Rand's novel The Fountainhead, and he's the prime antagonist of the book's hero, Howard Rourke. Toohey is a collectivist to the core. He writes for newspapers. He's involved in endless amount of collectivist organizations and promoting people who serve his ultimate ends. He works from the shadows, slowly, a piece at a time, and his ultimate goal is to have power over other human beings on as expansive a scale as what is possible. Toohey stands out amongst the Randian villains, at least in my mind, because he is a concentrated force of the sickness that is the desire for control as an end in and of itself. I bring this up because I want to share a few quotes from the book. These all come from a single speech that Ellsworth gave, and I've broken it up, so it's not going to be too much all at once. And tell me in the comments if any of these happen to strike a chord with you. It begins with the character Peter Keating asking him, "What do you want, Ellsworth?" And Ellsworth responds, "Power, Petey. I've always said just that. Clearly, precisely, and openly. It's not my fault if you couldn't hear. You didn't want to. I said I intended to rule, like my spiritual predecessors, but I'm luckier than they were. I inherited the fruits of their efforts, and I shall be the one who'll see the great dream made real." Let's start with this. Let's take a gander at what our own elites are up to, their desire for power and control over people, and all of the mechanisms they use to tighten the noose around our necks. Their ideas and their strategies did not originate with them, and the push towards collectivism has been going on longer than anyone alive has been living. But the goal's the same. It doesn't matter who's wearing the face of this monstrosity of an ideology, the goal's always the same. It never changes, and neither does the corruption that goes along with it. Let's go on to the second quote, at which Peter is asking Ellsworth who's wanting to rule. And Ellsworth replies, "You, the world. It's only a matter of discovering the lever. If you learn how to rule one single man's soul, you can get to the rest of mankind. It's the soul, Peter, the soul. Not whips or swords or fire or guns. That's why the Caesars, the Attilas, and the Napoleons were fools and did not last." Very interesting. I think this statement is something we're watching in action, and I think it accounts for why the powers that be have not gotten more violent towards the people than they already have. Once the state becomes physically violent towards its own people, it stokes further rebellion because it gets people mad, and it makes the lands and the sun very, very clear about who's the villain in this particular case, and it's always the state. But instead, if the state appoints themselves as the purveyors and the arbiters of moral good, which they are doing right now, any opposition to their goals, it becomes immorality. It's uncivilized. It's even heresy. And that kind of sophistry is very difficult for people to break free of, and I think that's what we're experiencing now. But here's the next quote. Ellsworth says, "The soul is that which can't be ruled. It must be broken. Drive a wedge in, get your fingers in it, and the man is yours. You won't need a whip. He'll bring it to you and ask to be whipped. Use him against himself. Make a man feel small. Make him feel guilty. Kill his aspirations and his integrity. Kill integrity by internal corruption." Now, can anyone out there make a case that this isn't exactly the method that's being used to demoralize and weaken people today? Everything that's being pushed right now is meant to go contrary to people's common moral standards and their common philosophy of life. And this crosses religious lines because there are some things that I've actually heard the channel Wiccan Conservative in particular refer to it as human values. And these are things that the vast majority of religions and philosophies agree on because it reflects the realities of humans living on Earth. But people are being encouraged to embrace hypocrisy and the guilt that goes along with that hypocrisy because it corrupts them, paralyzes them, and renders them unable to stand upon any principle. This is taking your enemy out before firing a shot. Now, the next quote that follows what Ellsworth Toohey had to say about altruism and how it serves his goals. There is a common misapprehension that equates altruism with kindness, but it is anything but. The standard of virtue in altruism is self sacrifice, and it states that anything done in your own interest is bad. That is a far cry from the practice of showing kindness to others, and it's important not to confuse one with the other. Let's look at the quote. It reads, "Tell men that altruism is the ideal. Not a single one of them has ever achieved it, and not a single one ever will. His every living instinct screams against it. But don't you see what you accomplish? Man realizes that he's incapable of what he accepted as the noblest virtue, and it gives him a sense of guilt, of sin, of his own basic unworthiness. Since the supreme ideal is beyond his grasp, he gives up eventually on all his ideas, all aspiration, and all sense of his personal value." We definitely have proof of that all around us. People are cynical, and many of them have given up. And as a consequence, they are now primed for being susceptible to external influences that preaches further self-destruction, and they'll go along with it. Now let's go on to the next quote. "Kill a man's sense of values. Kill his capacity to recognize greatness or achieve it. Great men can't be ruled. We don't want any great men. But don't deny the conception of greatness. Just destroy it from within. The great is the rare, the difficult, the exceptional. Set up standards of achievement that are open to all, to the least, to the most inept, and you stop the impetus into effort in all men, great or small. You stop all incentive to improvement, to excellence, to perfection." Now, this is a vital step in destroying people. When there's no distinction to be made because, success and failure, good and bad, the ordinary and the profound, it's all presented to you as the same, then people cease to be able to tell the difference, let alone to be able to understand why one state is to be preferred over the other. And that's why you have the effort that is unrelenting to dumb people down and to promote complete idiots into positions that are well beyond their level of competence. It's why the people who do not have the brains the gods saw fit to give to geese are prominent and loud figures. Their presence in elevated positions desecrates their jobs. It's a slap in the face to anyone who would be competent. And then we turn around and we see people who are honorable and intelligent and worthy, and they're slapped down at every turn. That not only demoralizes them, but those who watch what's happening. They're being made an example of in order to keep everyone else submissive. Now for our next quote. "Don't allow men to be happy. Happiness is self-contained and self-sufficient. Happy men have no time and no use for you. Happy men are free men. So kill their joy in living. Take away from them whatever is dear or important to them. Never let them have what they want. Make them feel the mere fact of a personal desire is evil. Bring them to the state where saying 'I want' is no longer a natural right, but a shameful admission. Unhappy men will come to you. They'll need you. They'll come for consolation, for support, for escape. Nature allows no vacuum. Empty a man's soul, and the space is yours to fill." Now, doesn't that put a rather interesting complexion on the past several years? How often have we been told that we should just forget our rights, and how terrible we are to even think of insisting upon them? How often has the idea of freedom been mocked and distorted? How often have patriots been painted as villains for opposing the people who want them to be helpless and miserable? But a confident people know they can manage their own affairs, and they know when it's valuable to consult and work with others, and they know how little they need an overarching authority figure telling them how to tie their own shoes. Now for our last quote. "There's always purpose in nonsense. Don't bother to examine a folly. Ask yourself only what it accomplishes." This is by far the most important statement in Ellsworth Toohey's speech, and it can change the nature of the conversation when criticizing and confronting the opposition. There's been entirely too much concern analyzing whatever brand of insanity is thrown of us. We ought to have been more focused on what the crazy is actually doing in society. And the common denominator of everything that's occurred is that it serves the interest of authoritarians, and it makes people easier for them to rule. Simple as that. The authoritarians are bullies. They require people who are weak enough to feel intimidated by what is ultimately as unimpressive a group as has ever been assembled. These are people who could never have gained power or influence without the population being enthralled to a self-destructive ideology and having been taught that from a young age. Ellsworth's Toohey character is the embodiment of the collectivist ideology as represented in the Fountainhead. His history as a character, manner of expressing himself, and his actions within the book, they serve as an illustration, and as a ruler by which other people can be measured in the real world. Those who think, speak, and act like Ellsworth Toohey should be recognized for the enemies that they are. They've made the inroads that they have because we've given them the benefit of the doubt for far too long. They need that benefit of the doubt in order to operate, to maintain their positions and expand them. You ever wonder why there's so much screeching about judgment and how cruel it is to judge anyone ever? That's because it's these authoritarians' greatest fear. Because judgment means people are exercising common sense. They are acting sensibly. They're using their power of reason and logic. And then you get enough people doing that, and the time of power for the authoritarians is over. And worse for them, their victims will have been inoculated from their influence. Now, the struggle in our society has been described as a spiritual war, and that is true, just not in the way that many people think. This isn't about Christianity being attacked and needing to respond to defend itself, because collectivism is dangerous to all religions. It's really dangerous to all other philosophies. It goes even beyond Americanism and anti-American sentiment in the struggle between the two. What this really is a facing off of ideals that lead to life, and then the sophistry that kills us in the slowest and most degrading fashion possible. So something I think we should all bear in mind when we're dealing with the Ellsworth Tooheys of this world. But now's the time to let me know what you think, either in the comment section below or come see me on Discord at Blackbird's Brew. There's a link to join in the description box below, and just go to the channel that's for current events and politics, and we can have a very good discussion about that, because I think when we consult with one another and exchange ideas, we can come up with good, solid action plans to help push back against this terrible influence and start removing the cancer that's been eating our society away. So, hope to see you there soon, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.